Okay, one of the things that has really made headlines, and I don't know why. I will say this: I hate to say the words "I don't care" because if I live my life that way, there are tons of things that happen out there that I legitimately do not care about, and this does fall in that category. It falls in that category when it happened to me, and it falls into that category now when you hear people on the right and the left talk about it. But I am curious to hear some of your takes on the Harrison Butker commencement speech at I believe it was Saint Benedict Catholic school, and I have no idea what state it is, but this was, from my understanding, the second year in a row he has given a commencement speech. Harrison and a friend own some type of production company, so maybe this is something he's done. When I was pulling up information for this, I found a Georgia Tech commencement speech that he has done. So I'm not sure if this is something he does all the time, but I do know that he did this one, and it's made a lot of noise. What are some of your thoughts about it?
Well, I will start by saying a word that people don't like. They get offended by this word, and the word has taken sort of a turn in the pop culture lexicon over the last 4 or 5 years.
I don't like the word
It's a word,
lexicon.
and you don't like the word I'm about to say right now, which is privilege. So
Oh, come on.
here's why it's okay for, because I have the same response as you, right? Like, I didn't necessarily, I didn't, I think I didn't like what he said, but there have been a lot of things that have been said that bothered me a lot more. But I think we aren't bothered by that because of that privilege. It doesn't affect us. It's never affected us, right? Like him talking that way about what he believes. And listen, I'm sure we'll get into the First Amendment, free speech, all of that, right? Because
Of course.
that's
And
not
you
what I'm
have to.
arguing.
You can't have this conversation
Yeah.
without it.
And I'm not arguing that. He has every right to say whatever the hell he wants to, right? And what people forget about First Amendment free speech, all that means is the government can't prosecute you and arrest you for saying certain things, right? That you have the freedom to express your opinion. Now, whatever happens after that, like that's just on how the public, I guess, receives that opinion and how they react to it. I mean, sure, you can say whatever the hell you want to say. I mean, obviously, we're doing this, so this,
Right.
this, you know, we get to say whatever the hell we want to say. Now, there are consequences to whatever we say, just like there are consequences to him. But I think it didn't bother us because none of this affects us directly, right? Because we're men, and if you and I'm sure we'll get into the historical context of all this, but if you kind of go down the list of the people who have had the most rights forever in this country, it starts with people like us, white males, and everybody else got the same rights as us long after we got. So
Do we know if people close to like, here's what I wish we had in this conversation. Were there any females that were graduating from St. Benedict's that had an issue with it? We've heard from the nuns. The nuns have spoken out. They didn't particularly care for it. But do we know if anybody that was graduating or parents in the audience? Here's where I would be upset. If I had a daughter that was graduating college and I heard a commencement speaker say, look, you don't really need to worry about your vocation. Your real importance is going to be as a homemaker and as a wife and raising a family and making dinner and things like that. I'd be like, what the hell did I just spend $100,000 on then? Right? But have we heard from any of these people?
no, I mean probably, but I think the noise of the narratives have probably drowned out anyone who is actually there and had an opinion on it, unless that opinion or quote that they gave fed one of those narratives, right? If they didn't, then they probably, whatever they said probably got drowned out by either the right or the left's take on this. And I don't think it should be an either or, because there's a lot of nuance, I think, in this topic, if that makes sense, right? Because you have I think the first thing is, does he have the right to say that? Well, yes, he does. I mean, as much as I disagree with it, he still has the right to say it. And we also have to think about the context in which he said it. It was a commencement speech at a Catholic university. So we can assume that most of these people who run that university probably have the same views as him. It's not like he's going into a public institution and saying this off the cuff. Does that make sense? So within the context, it's very expected that he would say something like that.
There was a segment in there where Butker addressed the women graduates directly in an attempt to counter, and this is a quote here, most diabolical lies they have been told. More than professional achievements, he said they should be excited to take on the vocation of homemaker. And then that's when he used his wife as an example, saying that her life really started when she began her vocation as a wife and as a mother. And then he later on said Isabella's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you ask her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say heck no. Now it's very important to understand Butker signed a 4-year, 25 million dollar extension just a season or two ago. He is a top 5 kicker in the NFL, but yeah, he of course she's going to say no. That's 6 million plus a year. Probably doing pretty well.
Yeah, it ain't like he's working 2 jobs, like teaching school and then going out and working at the Olive Garden, 3 nights a week,
Mowing lawns.
mowing lawns in his neighborhood while his wife stays at home with 4 kids and, hardly ever sees him because he's working. So, yes. So, again, I'm going to go back to that word privilege. Like, that is such a fucking privileged thing to say when you're a multimillionaire. And, of course, your wife's going to say, yeah, I like this. This is fine. Right? Now, I also think the gall of someone, and I don't remember the quote, and maybe you can, if you've got it pulled up, go back and when he says every woman should something or every woman, what did he exactly say?
I'm going to look for that part of the speech. The speech is long, and a lot of it wasn't sexy. There were some sexy parts in there, right? Some parts
Mhm.
that people freak out about or really, really support. Get people very emotional one way or the next. The majority of it wasn't. It's a commencement speech. Do you remember your
Sure.
commencement speech?
Oh, buddy, I do. You know who was the commencement speaker at Union's graduation in 2001? It was Chuck Colson, right? One of the guys that took the fall in Watergate, went to jail,
Oh,
got
okay.
converted
So
in
it was a good
jail. So
commencement speech.
shit, I don't know. I hope my diploma wasn't in there because I didn't have my chapel credits. It was a sticky note that was like, see the registrar. So,
Wow.
yeah, I know. Anyway, I think however he phrased it, he said a woman should or her dream should be this. Like the gall of a man to say this is what a woman's dream should be. Like how obtuse can you be to say that? Because I have a problem with that as well. The diabolical lie part, that's an issue, and then him saying this is what a woman's dream should be. Like, dude,
What
it's
if he's basing
2024.
that off of his wife's experience, though? Because
Then
that's
it's
what he alluded to.
anecdotal.
He said, "You ask my wife, she'll tell you. Be a homemaker. Do these things. She'll tell you that."
But it's anecdotal. That's his situation. But to take his situation, which is probably how many multimillionaires are there in this country? What, like maybe 3%? Maybe
I think
I
it's
don't know.
higher. No, I think it's actually higher than that. But yes, a very small percentage.
Very small percentage.
Collectively,
So
yeah.
I think he's got to have enough sense to say that's probably isn't going like the majority of these graduates. Their lifestyle isn't going to reflect the lifestyle of his wife. Right? Not everybody gets to marry a kicker. So I think that took some balls to do that, just to assume like, hey, everybody should want to do this. And hell, you know what? Maybe it did work out for him, but I can promise you this: it's not working out for them necessarily because of their Catholic religion. I think what's probably helping them live a really good life is that contract he just signed. So I think that plays into this as well. So you said that you didn't care about it very much, or it didn't bother you.
No, it
What?
didn't bother me, and I don't feel like I'm a good gauge because I want to be totally transparent here, right? A conservative leaning, uh, moderate, libertarian tenets throughout. Also, though, I had zero care when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. I had zero care when LeBron James, and to the point to where I can't even remember what LeBron James said. I know it was something during the Black Lives Matter, and they had maybe the shirt on that said "I can't breathe" or something like that. He may have
Mhm.
still. I don't know if he was with the Heat then or with the Lakers, but like none of that bothered me. I always look at these people as individuals. I think Charles Barkley put it best when he said back in the 80s and 90s, he said, "I'm not your kid's role model," and they're really not. I mean, if we are looking for that for kids role model, like we have a sad situation already. There's some kind of breakdown at home, or fatherless home, motherless home, whatever the case may be, or parents who are there that just aren't connected to their children. So I've never gotten upset with that. Like it was in with my conservative friends. I can remember multiple people here in West Tennessee saying, "I ain't never watching those kneeling bastards again." I mean, literally, I can quote you 6 people who said this same phrase, "those kneeling bastards." And same thing with basketball. We don't watch basketball anymore. It's
Yep.
way too hip hop, way too many rappers. Stuff. None of that's ever bothered me. Hollywood has done this throughout the past 20, 30 years. They've really gotten in action. Oh, they vote. None of that bothers me because I don't look for it for anything more than it is. So I feel like
Then
I've
what
been
is?
relatively consistent on what bothers me personally. Now, I do know it's a national story, so that's why we're talking about it, obviously.
It's funny that you say that about consistency because people on the right have lost their fucking minds over this, right? Because they think Harrison Butker is going to get canceled. And we talked about this earlier today. I'm not going to rip off Jon Stewart from the Daily Show. But oh my God. Like the side that calls people snowflakes all the time, they are the most sensitive group in this whole thing. Anytime something like this happens, they say, "Oh, they're trying to cancel it." Nobody's trying to cancel it, right? Shit, he posted a picture of Marsha Blackburn. His jersey is like what, the number one seller in the NFL the week this came out, right?
Yep.
And nobody
Oh,
has a
amongst
fucking
females, by the way, amongst females.
right. So I mean, nobody's getting canceled. He's actually become a bigger star because nobody knows who the fucking kickers are except for their favorite teams, right? I mean, they
No,
don't.
Justin Tucker, and then that's it. You and your
That's
team's
it.
kicker. Your team's kicker and Justin Tucker. That's the list.
That's it. That's it. Right. So, I mean, he is actually getting a larger platform because of this. So nobody's getting canceled. So the inconsistencies, like you've been consistent. I feel like I've been consistent on this too because while it didn't necessarily like bother me as much as some things have bothered me, I do find it problematic the language that he uses as a man to discuss what he believes a woman's role should be. Now, that being said, here's where I
But he
think this
has
gets really.
daughters, I believe. He has daughters.
He does, and that's fine. But here's where this gets important. I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't want that. I think this is where this opens up. If a woman wants to make that her and pursue that as her passion, absolutely, like go for it. Like, and I know a lot of people, at least when I was growing up, whose mom stayed at home. Right? Both of my parents worked. My dad was a salesman. My mom was a school teacher. They both worked. I stayed with my grandparents when I was a little kid. But I know people, friends of mine from high school, who are grown adults now, and they chose that willingly. They wanted to be at home with their kids. On the flip side of that, I know people who think that would be probably like a living nightmare to be with their kids
Sure.
all day
Yeah,
long.
COVID taught a bunch of
Oh
us
my
that,
God.
didn't it?
So here's the thing: like, if you want to do that, that's awesome. And I think that's the difference because when he alluded or entered into this conversation by saying the most diabolical lie that women have been told is having a career or whatever, that's the part I have a problem with. Right? What he should have, like, I would have had zero issue if he would have been like, "Hey, if that's a passion you want to pursue, go for it." However, having a career doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, or vice versa. I can remember going to Calvary Baptist Church after I'd left church completely, but on Mother's Day, right? Just as something, because I knew my mom would probably wanted me to do it. And I remember I
Hmm.
went to a service, probably 2012, 2013. The pastor is Grant Gaines there. His dad was a pastor at Bellevue for so many years, president of SBC. And this is going to take this conversation in a sort of a religious term. I can remember him from the pulpit saying a woman's calling is to be a mother and a wife and to be at home. And that's God's will for them to do that. That's fucking strong. Like,
Is there
that's
a
strong.
biblical base though for that phrase? Like we love to atomize, like Dr. J says all the time. We love to atomize the Bible. Now we all remember the picture back in the day of the umbrella that is God, the father next, and then over under the father was the wife, and then under her were the children, and
Yeah.
you saw the order there. Now, I never saw that in the Bible, but you've read, as someone who's not a believer, you've read much more of the Bible than I have. Do we have examples of that in the Bible where
Yeah.
people can atomize it down and say, look, you're supposed to stay home and raise the family? We know in church settings, when I did go to church, I spent the majority of my church time in a Church of Christ church. That's a big deal there. Women can't lead services. They lead Sunday school classes and classes with the children. They can't lead a prayer if a man's present. They can't serve at the table to pass out the Lord's Supper every Sunday. Like there are very strict and stringent rules for women. Now, I'll say this. That's the last time that the men have balls, because everyone that I've known there that is married, the woman decides everything else outside of that church building. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. But that is the norm, at least at the churches of Christ that I attended with my ex-wife. That was the norm at most of them.
Yeah, and I can't point to specific scripture, but I think where this comes from, and there may be specific scripture, I don't know. But where this comes from is the dynamics that are laid out specifically in Christianity, religion, because it is so historical, right? And we know sort of where women have stood historically. And it's always been a notch or 10 below men, right? I mean, that's just, I don't
Sure.
believe that. I'm just saying that's the way this is
Historically, yes, it's inarguable.
history.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where a lot of this comes from. And so there's enough of that within Christianity, Catholicism, to sort of set that umbrella illustration up, right? Like it is God. And now I will say this: in the Bible, there are probably in the New Testament, probably in some of Paul's letters, there are scriptures about the man being the head of the household, the spiritual leader.
Yeah.
So that is probably a playoff. And look, I'm sure if we Googled it and we could cherry pick some scriptures and throw it out there to where we sort of see where the church lands on this. But look, you can look at, there's never going to be female priests in Catholicism. There's probably never
There
going
are
to
in
be
the Methodist Church.
Well, that's not Catholicism.
But it's Catholic light. I'm saying you're saying it won't ever get there?
In the Catholic Church, I don't think so. Southern Baptist Church, that I think that's going to be the split, that and the LGBTQ stuff at some point, or it's just going to die eventually. But these are still very, very, I think when anything is dying or there's a big shift coming, you're going to have these tensions that start to be exposed. And I think this is one of those tensions that is starting to be exposed, where I think people who believe a certain way are feeling threatened by society.
And I know that nationally numbers are down for church attendance. So what I'm about to say is not, it's not going to seem like it makes sense, but no one is going after the church. I hear that all the time. You hear that in this speech. I've got the speech pulled up now. He's saying, we have to fight for a right for this. No one is going after a church that I know of. Now, maybe there are, examples of somewhere people doing bad things to a church, of course, and that's horrific. But as far as the church's right to exist, I think what's happening is you are seeing, and a lot of this is based off of what happened in the 80s, and our friend Bob Ney, when he went into Congress, the Young Republican movement by Abramoff started that in colleges and stuff. And Jack Abramoff, who was Jewish, literally said, hey, all these Christians are sitting throughout the United States, and they're not necessarily politically aggressive. We can round all them up. And that's when you started hearing so much about the abortion stuff and things like that. That was in the 80s and big time play in the 90s, and they grabbed a hold of all these evangelicals, and that's the association now. But as far as coming after a church, I don't see it. I don't even know how it could happen. And we talk about snowflakes. That feels snowflakey to me, like the whole the church playing the preemptive victim sometimes. I don't know where that happens. I've never heard of anybody saying church shouldn't exist. The worst thing that I could imagine people saying is like, hey, there's a separation of church and state, which we should all be pretty good with.
We should be, but we're not. Like these things are meshing like quickly, right? I mean, you've heard what Trump said about birth control, what Trump said about abortion, like, and all of this stuff has a religious base to it. Right? It's not like the anti-abortion stuff doesn't just come out of nowhere. Right? It's rooted in fundamental religion. Uh, Same with birth control, right? That's a Catholic issue,
It is, and
and that
he addresses birth control, compares that in his speech to playing God. Also, IVF, which I'm fine. Like I don't. I was glad when it got sent back to the states. I am a pro-life person with exceptions, but I'm a pro-life person. And the exceptions are incest, rape, health of the mother. In case anybody was wondering, but I
but
will.
I think most people are. I mean,
Right,
I
me
am.
too.
I'm there with you on that. Now that being said,
Right.
all right. Well, this is another conversation. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, no, no. Well, it is and it isn't. We're like when we are laying out things for other people, like to say, look, this is the right way to do it. He did it in a church setting. I know the nuns spoke out against it. Neither one of us have that big of a problem with it. But when you're looking at it going towards legislation, or in my opinion, now something even worse than it going towards legislation is it going towards victimization. And I think that that is even worse when we see people pretend to be victims. And I know there was 30,000 people who signed something saying, "Look, Chiefs, you need to release this guy." Right? There's like 30,000 people, Kansas City
Yeah,
fans and stuff.
that's
But
stupid.
I mean,
Like,
and that's nothing. That's not even a drop in the bucket. The Hunts aren't even going to listen to that. The dude's a top 5 kicker. They're like, look, if we can keep him on the team and he's not too much of a distraction, I mean, hell, we got Taylor Swift coming to these games. We'll be fine. So that was never going to happen. But I guess the problem is when we play, and the left does this. The left is the OG of this bullshit behavior, but they started playing a victim all the time. Everything was the worst thing in the world, and now the right has overcorrected with it. But the victimization, I think, is what leads to greater divide amongst the people.
yeah, and I think there are some things that collectively the left has done, but I don't know. I'm going to push back a little bit because here's the thing about what, at least for me, and I would consider myself part of the left. I don't give a shit what the church does. The church can do whatever the fuck it wants to do. I'm not going to be a part of it, right?
Hmm.
But the problem is they are expecting everyone to do. They believe that they and listen. Let me back up a little bit too. Not all churches are like this. Okay, I had a really good experience at a local church here at All Saints. So whenever I'm saying the church, not every church is like this. So what I mean by that is the fundamental evangelical churches. So you're
Right.
talking some Catholics, um, most of the Southern Baptist Convention, right?
Hmm.
Maybe some Pentecostals. So that group, fundamental evangelicals, they expect everyone else to sort of bend to what they want to do. When the reality is, people on the left don't give a shit what they do. We just want them to leave us alone. That's the difference, right? So, like the victimization that they're trying to play is complete bullshit. They want everybody to bend to them. And then when everybody doesn't bend to them, and when everybody says, "Hey, you can't say that shit," or "We don't agree with that," then all of a sudden they're like, "Whoa, hey, we're being canceled," or "This is not, you're trying to end the church as we know it." Like nobody's trying to end the church. Like they're going to end themselves eventually, right? Like society is going to move on. I believe.
Yeah, I don't. I really, really don't. And maybe they will move differently, move into something else. But I do believe, and maybe this is just because of me personally, I think we have to believe there's something greater out there. None of this makes sense without that being the case, right? The weird innate love you have for your child feels like something bigger than just, oh, this is my kid, and I'm going to love it. Like it doesn't feel societal. It feels greater than that. And I know we see it in nature, but not the same way. Not the same way humans are. I think people will always believe in something. They always have. Since as far back as we can
Well,
track.
that's
Now they
that's just
believed in different stuff, but
that's
they
all we
have
got the
believed
Bible.
in something. True.
I mean,
Yeah, that's 100% true. And you know
everybody's trying.
how
Everybody's.
many you know how many books in the Bible, especially like in the New Testament, and like this will blow your mind. You may or may not have known this, but it's either 7 or 17. And let's just go with 7 because I know it's at least 7. 7 different people before Jesus were killed for the sins of the followers and resurrected at the third day. That's alarming because that predates Jesus, right? So there are some stories that have been told and told in different ways. But I guess I'm saying people still want to believe in something. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. Now, is it going to be Southern Baptist or Catholicism or whatever? Could that change? I mean, after the Catholic Church got through all the sex scandals and stuff like that, I believe now they'll be here forever. But regardless, people will still believe in something. That's the part that's not going away, is a belief in something greater.
Look, I want to believe in something. Like that's it's. I mean, I miss that.
I
Like I
invited you to
miss.
church.
I, I know. I know. Like I do miss that idea. And my girlfriend and I talk about it all the time. You know, we were raised in the Southern Baptist Church. Her dad was the pastor, and we miss that. Well, we miss parts of it. We miss that community. We miss that hope that everything's going to work itself out. But it really just it flies in the face of logic. All of that said, I'm not. I'm not an atheist. I'm with you. I do believe there is something probably bigger than because it doesn't make any sense that humans out of all of this evolution that's taken place because like that evolution is scientifically undeniable. However, humans were the only ones to like sort of self-actualize, right? Like we were the
Mhm.
only ones with critical thinking skills, with the ability to create all of this technology, the ability to, well, really burn the world down, which is what we're doing right now. Well, no other animal species is able to do that. So there is something to it, right? Like that can't just be random. And that's where I land on this. But here's the difference in me thinking that and somebody like fucking Harrison Butker who's talking about like standing firm in masculinity and a woman's place is in the kitchen. The forcing of those beliefs on the larger society is what bothers me the most about this unholy alliance between fundamental religion and hyper conservatism that's going on right now. I think that bothers you too, because that's like,
It bothers me, and it never did before. I'll be honest with you, it never did before because I honestly, when I was younger, it did feel like you know, you and I are close to the same age, or older, of course, but we're very close to the same age. And when we were growing up, you did hear because we grew up, and I never knew what I was looking at, and it wasn't because of Bob Ney, without Bob Ney, and you know, reading and documentaries that I've watched about this that I would know now. But this was, if you trace it back, right when we were kids, if you were pro-life, you were a Republican, and Democrats wanted to kill babies. So just, you know, we hear it now, right? They want to be able to kill a baby up to 3 years of age. I mean, just you hear all of
what?
this stuff. Yeah, 100%. I've heard it. I've literally
I've never heard of it.
watched the clips on. Oh yeah, up to 3 years of, you know, has to start in California. But no, we hear these things, right, on these conservative sites, and you know, the crazy wackadoos that are out there. They'll say stuff like that, right? You know, abortions up to 9 months and all of this stuff. But if you go back, here's what frustrates me, and it frustrates me because of the ignorance that I had, and I would assume most people have. All you needed to go back is right during Reagan, right? The Republicans had not had the House in the U.S. House for years and years and years and years. Presidents and presidents and presidents had not had control of the House. In the '90s, they got it with Newt Gingrich, Bob Ney, all of them. They got it, and they did that off of Jack Abramoff, who was a young Republican, a Jewish person, who literally said him, and there were other people with him. It wasn't just him. You know, there's Tom DeLay and all these other people. You would know their names if I said them. But they said, look, these people aren't necessarily voting in large blocks. Like, we can't count them to the polls. So they, on purpose, a Jewish person, which I have no problem with Jewish people. But I mean, he does not believe in the New Testament, but he knows you do. And he knows that he can push a handful of buttons and they can get you to the polls. And when you get to the polls, they have the power. And you know, later on you had McCain Feingold that put all the money, you know, the PAC money and stuff into Washington, and we see what we have today. But if you look at it, it was never authentic. Now, the people who go and vote, the people who are upset by these things, the people who I'm not saying they're not authentic. I'm talking about this idea that politics, that republicanism is connected to Christianity No, it's not. I would suggest to you, if you were really Christian, you wouldn't, you would be a lot more worried about that than politics. I would never say don't vote, but what I'm saying is, it's like that would be so much more important than trying to advance politically. Like that would be your drive. But this was all an idea to gather a large swath of people to vote. That's it. That's all it
Oh,
was. You know, the
Cody,
South was with Democrats everywhere in the South, 70s and
sure.
80s. You'd hear blue dog Democrats. You would hear these terms. And so what happened is, and it was a slow conversion. Nothing happens immediately. It eventually, as that frog was boiling in the water, they kept clicking it up and up and up, and you would see, these areas like where we live in West Tennessee, they were blue. Yeah, John Tanner, everything was blue, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden it was red, and then now it's just how deep of red does it get?
It is blood red, man. Two things. And I lost the train of thought on the first thing I was going to say. The second thing, though, smart play by Abramoff, because think about this. You're
Mm-hmm.
going after a voting bloc
Mm-hmm.
that already wants to believe in something. They're already collectively believing in something that they've never seen. It's not that far of a stretch to get them all collectively behind an idea or a principle that's connected to that. So, regardless of whatever religion he is, what goes beyond that is he's a hell of a politician, because he knew exactly what would work, and what better group to go after than a group that's already collectively in a group think situation. Right? So all you're going to do is just transfer that group thing from the church onto politics, and then now you've got what we got right now. I think this comes down, and this is the thing I'd forgotten, and now I remember. This comes down to a word that people lose track of when it comes to the abortion conversation. Nope, I don't think anybody likes the idea of killing a living thing. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I've never been a hunter. I don't like
Don't
the
pay
idea of
attention to
killing
what's
an
going on
animal.
in Gaza then.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Well, yeah, we're so separate from that. That
Right.
doesn't, and that's the thing. The people who are so adamantly against abortion have probably never been in that situation, right? It's something very easy for them to attack because they're removed from it. They're outside of it. So they can lob these grenades over into it. Here's the thing, as the father of a daughter, I don't look. I hope she never has to make that decision. Shit, if she lives in Tennessee, she won't have a choice. But that's the word that's the most important here, is the word choice, and that's what's most important in the abortion conversation. That's what's most important in this Harrison Butker speech conversation. What everybody wants is some type of autonomy. We want to be able to make the best decision for ourselves and our children without any kind of reach in, right? I
But,
feel
but
like
but that's a Republican tenet, right?
is it?
Smaller government. Yeah,
I
it
mean, it
is. I
is.
mean, I didn't change, they did, right? That is a tenet of the party. I've asked congressmen, I've asked people, I've asked Bob Ney a million times. I was like, I'm not wrong, right? Like, smaller government, more liberty, less intrusiveness into our life, right? Like, that's how I grew up. That's what we are, right? He's like, it's what we're supposed to be. You and I spoke a lot about women, and I disagree with you on the abortion thing. And this is a whole other conversation for another day. The only thing about that is choice. I still think you do have to consider the choice of a life, right? I think you have to consider that one too. But you and I spoke about women as good as we could, but we're not women. I want to read you this from Harrison Butker's quote. It says, "Men, be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things." Okay, I like it now. The cultural emasculation of men. I don't. I mean, I'm a man. I've never felt emasculated, but it says do hard things. I like this part. Never settle for what is easy. I like that part. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. And everyone knows, being a place kicker, the very few things glorify God more than that. I speak from
Or
experience as an introvert who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree. Man, that is some bullshit. He literally said, lean into something you don't enjoy, as he is a place kicker because
he's a
it
place
glorifies
kicker.
God.
making millions
that
of
part. All
dollars.
right, this part I had missed. Let's take some of the bullshit out because that's a tough thing to get through, and I'm not going to be able to defend my man Harrison on that. Even though 2 years ago he was my fantasy kicker and he did a very nice
Oh
job.
my God.
He did a very good job. But I will say this: I will ask this: what do the cultural emasculation of men is what emasculates us? Is it the fact that women can work and don't need us? Is it the fact that men are gay on television? Is it the fact that sometimes men dress as women? Is it the fact that women vote? Like, how are we being emasculated? Because chances are it's happening, and I don't know what's happening, and I want someone to tell me so I too can be upset.
I don't know what it means either. Like, I don't even know what is masculinity. So what's the definition of that? Right?
Well, okay. I can tell you my definition, my term. Like to
Okay.
be masculine is because I do think it is very important for a man. Like I have raised sons, and I
Mhm.
tell them, right? You take a young lady out to eat, you open the car door, you open the door, you pay for the meal. You are to be the protector, provider of the family. I mean, these are things that I have said to my boys. Now, I look at that as like Walker decisions. I don't look at that as like, oh, everybody should do this, right? I mean, I'm the only thing I can do is raise those kids. I can't raise anyone else's, right? So, but I
Sure.
look at that for us, like that is the thing. And I've never thought of that as society as a whole. It's just, hey, this is what makes a man. I've been married before and not had a lot of money, but had a wife at the time who wanted to stay home with kids. And I always said, that's fine. I worked 3 jobs. She stayed home. Like it was fine. Like that. I felt like that's my responsibility of what masculine is, right? You walk on the sidewalk closest to traffic and you let your female partner walk on the inside of you away from traffic. If there is a fist fight at a bar during a football game, you don't let her do the fighting, you do. I mean, those things, that's masculinity, right?
So yes, that's what I always thought. Right. And now I don't know. Like now that I've gotten older, I don't know. I've been called a beta male, Chuck. I don't know if you knew that
You
or not.
have been called a beta. It was a lot of people think it's an accurate description. I was
I
going to bring it
know
up, but I was thinking it the whole time.
maybe, but here's what I think masculinity is. I think masculinity is looking at people who may refer to somebody as a beta male and not giving a fuck what they say, right? And being
Mm-hmm.
who you are as authentically as you can be, right? So I don't know that goes necessarily completely against the traditional norms of masculinity. Like I do believe, and maybe because I was raised in the South, maybe because I grew up playing sports, there is part of me that's just internally will always sort of lean into a lot of the stuff that you just said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
and I think
that,
it's cultural, it's regional, it's where we grew
it
up,
is,
it's what we've
it
seen.
is. But those are a lot of things I've had to untangle myself, right? Like it's
All right,
not
so
like I don't. Go ahead.
let me ask you a question right now. And I
Mhm.
don't know. I know I know somebody like this. I can't picture them in my head though, but I'm sure I do. If there's a female providing and the husband is staying at home, is it weird? It shouldn't
No,
be. It
no,
shouldn't be. But
it's not
if you're
weird.
being honest, it's a little weird for me, and it shouldn't be. It's a little weird for me,
It's not
and
weird
I
for
know it
me.
shouldn't be. Okay,
Um,
you're trying to be
I
a kept
think
man.
I'm not like I just I don't know. Like I'm going to be in a marriage where unless I find a CEO's job somewhere, my
Hmm.
partner and wife is going to make more money than me. Period. Right? Like I'm not going to be the creative director of a company, and she is.
Yeah.
So that that's going to happen, and that's not a big deal. It happened when I was married in my first marriage. My ex-wife was a nurse. I was a teacher. She made more money than I did. Like I didn't give a shit. Like we were. It was a partnership, so we were in it together. So that doesn't bother me. I do think, strangely enough, um, but I don't know if this is necessarily like a masculine thing or not. I think it's just a good human quality to have is to be direct, to be honest, and to not take any shit from people. So if I see a man who is not direct, not honest, and takes a lot of shit from people that they shouldn't, then maybe I tend to view that person as unmasculine. I'm not going to say effeminate because I don't think that's fair either. Because I know there are plenty of women. My partner is one of them the best boss I ever had, the best principal I ever had was a female because they are both direct. Neither one of them take any shit from anybody. But I don't think that's a masculine or feminine characteristic or trait at all. I think it's just it's a good success trait, right? Those three things are. I don't know. That's a very interesting conversation about what makes someone masculine, like what makes a male masculine. I don't know what this attack on masculinity is, right? Like I don't know.
Harrison thinks that part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture. And when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well.
What
Be
a,
unapolog-
what a fucking stupid thing to say.
be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against cultural emasculation of men. All right, I've read that part. So,
God,
but see,
like
but
that's
this right here is based not in knowledge either. If you want to look at when you say
that's
fatherless homes, when when Harrison said it and other people say it, you think about certain communities, but we don't look back at the 70s when the CIA literally put crack cocaine into black neighborhood. I mean, this is the problem with reading, and this is the problem with learning about things. Is because then you get very pissed off, and then people on local talk radio call you a Democrat when truth is you're just telling the truth. But we punish crack cocaine differently than we did cocaine. Right? We
sure,
literally punished the
of
two.
course.
We broke up, like we literally did break up homes. We have broken up homes, systematically and on purpose with intent. We have done that to certain communities throughout our country's history, and we see the fallout for it now. But I grew up with a single mom. You know that my mom was married 7 times. Now
Mhm.
number 5 and number 7 were the same. But I mean, she was a strong woman. She had a lot of issues, but she was a strong woman, and we were in and out of places. And finally, she bought a house when I was like in 6th grade or something, and we stayed there for a while. So the men would move out, and then instead of us moving in and out, the men would move in and out. But it was one of those things where had she not done that, my life would have been chaotic all the way up until I graduated high school. Had she
Yeah,
not been able to have a job, own a home, do things, and act like it wasn't chaotic, but it's a lot less when they're moving, doing the moving out, and it was not you. It's a lot better. So I don't know. Yes, there are fatherless homes, and yes, there are men who are pieces of shit, and all of these things happen in life. But there's reasons why some of these things happen. There are reasons why some of these things happen.
yeah. The fatherless homes thing is such a trope, and I think there's some. It's rooted in some racist tendencies that we have.
It's
My
the last thing it is the emasculation of men. That's not what it is. I mean,
it's not.
men can't hit on women, men can't cheat on women, men can't do all these things and expect the women to stay anymore. Like that's okay, right? That's a reasonable expectation I would imagine for a woman to have.
Yeah, well, and my daughter grew up for most of her life without me in the home. I saw her every other weekend until she moved up here. You grew up without your father in the home, your biological
Hmm.
father.
Right?
Um, that's not that doesn't dictate success or criminal behavior.
Statistically, it does. It doesn't
I,
anecdotally,
I
but
would
statistically.
push back. No, I don't know. No, I think that's something that I think what you can look at is single parent homes have lower incomes
Hmm.
than dual parent homes. That's a
Hmm.
bigger indicator in my mind of success in a child, right?
Is
It's
that
like
not
what
chicken egg?
it could be, yes. But that being said, if a child was raised by a lesbian couple with a
Hmm.
dual income home, their chance
Hmm.
of success rates is much higher probably than a person being raised by a single mom and a single income.
Or even a
So
single
yes,
father, perhaps. Yeah.
or a single father. Yes.
Yep.
So I don't think it necessarily like a man in the home is not the magic bullet that's going to cure society's ills. Now,
But aren't there
does it
differences between men and women? I mean, don't we think that's
absolutely
important?
look? I think in a perfect situation, you would have a, a father and a mother. Let me back up because I don't believe that's true at all either. I think in a perfect situation, you would have two loving partners, regardless of gender, in that home raising that child with a dual income. Right? I think that is ideal. I don't know. Maybe a perfect situation is a father and a mother because you have two perspectives, right? Because look, men
Yeah,
and women are different.
and that's where I fall. Now, here's the
So
thing: if we're ranking them like mom and dad number one, and then loving, two loving parents number two, like if I'm doing the hierarchy thing, but still, I mean
I'm
that's
gonna, I'm gonna do that 1A, 1B. I think that's like
but
because
one A
there's
is still
there
on top. I mean, you can say
yeah, but
whatever,
there are
but we're all
just
thinking the same thing. 1A is on top.
yeah, but I feel like there are just too many like humans, we're just not great in general. Right? I mean, the
Right.
majority of us fuck up all the time. So you rarely see that. Maybe not rarely, but yeah. And ideally, I think you would have a mom and a dad, two partners with loving that child or children, loving each other. Then yes, ideally, I think everyone would want that. That's not reality. Okay. Sometimes, but so that being said, because it's not reality, doesn't mean that if you're raised by one parent or the other parent, that, oh shit, like you might as well just give up. Like that's not it either. So, when this comes down to it, I think Harrison Butker, he can say whatever he wants to say in that situation. I'm not
Correct.
ever going to say he can't say that. Here's what I will say. I think what he said was misogynistic. I think it was closed minded. I think that he probably doesn't understand the history of what women have had to go through here. In the end, if a woman wants to commit her life to being at home and being a wife and a mother, like go for it. Give it 110%. If a
Hmm.
woman wants to pursue her degree in industrial engineering, I know that was his, but whatever. If she wants to do that, 100% go for it. She should be able to do that without feeling any kind of guilt about not being there. Because I do think, and this is another conversation where we're getting up on the 45-minute mark right now. I think there are different pressures and expectations put on women that aren't put on men when it comes to raising kids. And that's not fair. Right?
It's total garbage. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that completely because there's absolutely nothing when it comes to love and all of that. That now
Mhm.
it's not saying that women aren't important, true, but like men can fill in those gaps just like a
Sure.
woman can if there has to be gaps. Here's what I would do to challenge Harrison Butker and everybody who's listening to this and say, God, this is just total bullshit, right? I mean, he gets to say we're agreeing. He gets to say whatever. Here's the problem. He makes the speech. He owns a production company. He is a millionaire, right? 6 million plus a year. He's making really good living, and I don't begrudge him for that at all. He's a hell of a kicker. He's top five on earth at doing what he does, so he should be paid accordingly. But here's where I have a problem. He didn't follow this speech up and come to Tennessee and go to Nashville and talk to Scott Sapicki and Cameron Sexton and Chris Todd and all of them and say, hey, look, we really need to work on laws because I do believe that two parent homes and the man being in the home is very important. And something that's actually happening, it may not be the emasculating of men. Maybe that's not society's biggest problem. But I do think in some states, Tennessee being one of them, when you get into talking about why do you not start with custody of a child during a divorce, we know that 60% or so of marriages end in a divorce. Why don't we start at 50-50? Why do you have to pay for it to get there? Tennessee is one of the most ass backward states when it sits there. So if people like Harrison Butker really truly believed or researched what he regurgitated, that's where he would start. I don't know of other states because I've always lived in Tennessee that have that law. I've heard Missouri is better. You've told me Pennsylvania is better, but I'm sure Mississippi, Alabama, I mean, just the usual suspects, just round them up. Why wouldn't we start there? Why wouldn't Harrison
Texas is
say, look,
worse.
that's almost impressive. Honestly, I didn't know it could be worse. Why don't we start there? Why doesn't Harrison start there and go to these with his production company and his camera crew and say, two parent homes, men have been emasculated. Y'all have made them as people who decide on visitation with children. Y'all have made them feel this way. They need to be in their children's lives. And look, and for the men that fuck it up, that lie, and I've got examples of that, of men who, act like they want to be with their kids all this time and they never use it. They just want their child support lower. Hey, deal with him accordingly. But I'm talking about all of the parents out there who do want to have it. Why aren't we doing the things that matter? We're making a commencement speech. We're talking about it Sunday at church. We're doing all of those things. Now Harrison misses some church because football, but
Sundays.
yeah,
Well,
Sundays. He's Catholic though. They go on Saturdays and stuff too. So I'm
yeah, he can
sure
go
I'm
to
sure he
mass.
gets it in. Yeah, I'm sure he gets it in. But my point is this: if he said these things and he was doing the other things, I'd be like, well, at least he is putting his effort into what he's saying. But honestly, if I read this, it's just a whole lot of victimization again. And again, sometimes that's worse than bad legislation is really bad victimization because he's not doing the things that exist that we all know about. We know Tennessee, really, really bullshit. Like the standard is not starting at 50-50. Even if they tell you
No,
it is, it's not. You
it's
said
not.
Texas is worse. That's insane. Why are these red states, these conservative states, these manly states where you still hunt your food and then you bring it home and your wife prepares it? Why aren't we doing that?
Well, but we're not doing it because, look, being grounded in this traditional, essentially evangelical way of thinking is it does a disservice to women, right? Because the thought process is the reason that women by default in Tennessee and fucking Texas and probably every red state start out with the whole, like all the time except for every other weekend and one night a week. That's the default. The reason for that is because we put women in a box over here as nurturers and mothers, and that's how we view them. And so something that Harrison, and before we close out, I do want to get to this. And I think this is where he missed the mark. Well, he missed the mark on a lot of things, but I think he's forgetting about the amount of women who were trapped in abusive marriages, not because they weren't allowed to get a divorce. They couldn't fucking work. They couldn't vote. Up until the 60s and 70s, shit, the 80s and 90s, hell, right now, we're not even at wage equality with men and women,
We're not in a
right?
1-to-1, and we sure as hell
We're
weren't
not
when we
one to
grew up.
one.
Yeah, we sure as hell
No,
weren't when I grew up. So women do stay in bad situations
of
longer,
course they do,
which does
because
have
they can't
a
help
different,
it.
it has a bad power dynamic.
Because what happens if they leave? Well, shit, now I can't take care of my kid financially. I can't feed him. I don't have anywhere to live. So I'm just going to stay here in this abusive relationship. So, like, fuck him for saying all that shit. Now, look, I'm not saying Harrison Butker is any of those things. He might be a wonderful husband, but guess what, dog? Not everybody is. And not every woman is married to a multimillionaire. Like, you don't get to say that shit generally. You can say, hey, for me, it really worked out. But for all you ladies out there who are single and aren't married, and you got your chemical engineering degree, shit, go for it. Knock it out. Make your six figures. Be in a situation where if you're in a bad marriage, you can leave and be independent. Hell yeah. I could live all day in that world. Right?
It was, again, a speech that did not offend me. Now, just for clarification, I've done some further research into it. Last year, he spoke at Georgia Tech. This year, he spoke at St. Benedict, right? And so I think he ramped it up a little bit. So, a little bit of time and place there.
That shit wasn't gonna fly in Atlanta.
No. And the Georgia Tech graduates, I mean, they're at 200,000 plus for the degrees. That would have reached some resentment. Yeah, so if he would have said, look, if you want to go and pursue a career, that's fine. But also, if you want to be a homemaker, whatever it is, whatever this experience, this college has taught you, those things, all of that would have been fine. And it's still fine. No one's, I don't know of anybody other than the 30,000 people that signed that petition. I don't know of anybody trying to cancel him. All the stuff about Travis Kelce saying, if he's coming back, I'm quitting. None of that was true. None of that was true. That
No.
was just stuff put on
Well,
the internet. None of that
I'm
ever
like,
happened. Travis Kelce never said that. Travis Kelce wants to win games too. What did Peyton Manning say at the Pro Bowl that one year about Vanderjagt? He's like, our idiot
kickered up
kicker. I
kicker.
mean, no one gives a shit about the kicker. Just kick it through the uprights, man. Let's go. I mean, you're other than Justin Tucker, you're barely part of the team. You're more of a part of the team than Gabe and I are, and that's it. Right? I mean,
The
come on.
only time people care about the kicker is when they're on the field, which is like 7 to 10 times a game.
Right.
Maybe, right? Counting kickoffs and extra points or field goals. Okay. Other than that, nobody gives a shit about it. And you
No.
know what else? There was out there. Andy Reid also didn't say, "I'm not going to let some woke mob cancel my kicker," even though it wasn't an article in the Jackson Post this week.
It blows my mind, again, how the right, we are supposed to be tougher. We do want limited government. We think these people in Hollywood are nuts. Shut up and dribble. Stand up, you kneeling bastards. All of these things that we have said so comfortably. The fact that we can forget all that now and say, let this man talk his first. I mean, when no one in truth and reality, a very small percent, not even 1% of the population, not even 10% of 1% of the population signed a petition to get him fired. And if he gets fired, if he gets cut, the Hunts own the team. They can do whatever they want. It's a private business. Who cares? Who
Right?
cares? They get to decide that. They get to decide if that plays or not. But it blows my mind. Thank God we're the tougher of the two colors of the red or blue, because could you imagine how we would act if we weren't?
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Yeah, thank God. Thank God the right is the tough side in this fight.
Did you ever
Thank
get tore
God.
up with how Hollywood? I mean, I guess not, because most of them are leftist anyway. But not all of them. There are some people that are pretty hard right wingers, Mel Gibson, stuff like that. Have you ever been upset with Mel Gibson based off of anything he said? Jim Caviezel, guys like that.
No, I don't know.
No,
Like
Mel Gibson had the whole Jew thing not too long ago, or a
that
handful
seemed
of
a
years ago,
little
when he was drunk. I mean, he was
a little
drunk and yelling.
reckless.
Yeah, he was drunk and
Yeah,
yelling. I mean, come on, who hasn't been there?
that's a little reckless. No, I don't think. I think Tim Allen said some shit like concern. Like it doesn't bother me because like I never watched any of that stuff, and like I don't. Not a lot that celebrities say bother me. I think shit. Clearly, it doesn't. Like Aaron Rodgers is still one of my favorite athletes, and he's gone off the fucking rails lately. So, like I watch sports to watch sports. I'm not changing my mind about what I believe based on what an athlete says. Right now, a musician, an artist, somebody who I think is intelligent, and I shouldn't like cast aspersions on all athletes. I know there are some intelligent athletes. I may listen more to what they have to say, but like, no, I just want to watch Aaron Rodgers throw touchdowns. I don't give a shit what he says. I do think it's important to know that he has a platform, and I think he can't be as reckless as he is with the platform that he has. So maybe that bothers me a little bit. But I'm not going to watch the Jets play. Right? Like I'm going to watch him every time he's on television, regardless of what he says.
I guess if I'm going to wrap it up, we can't be the same party that says, I ain't watching those kneeling bastards anymore, and then say they're trying to cancel Harrison Butker. We can't have it both ways. No one in their right mind thinks that's consistent. It's very unfortunate when we act that way as a party. And it just, the kneeling thing. I mean, if we have a problem with the kneeling, then churches have problems every Sunday, right? I mean, it was always overblown. It was always overblown. The kneeling thing was. This is probably overblown too. It's time and place. He was saying it there. It's the reaction more than the statement. It's the reaction from the public, from everyone not named Harrison Butker and the people in attendance, right? It's the reaction.
Right.
Same way it was from Colin Kaepernick, who was told to kneel by like an Army Ranger, I believe, if I remember the story right, because he said this is in reverence and it will still show your sign of protest. And
Sure.
boy, did that blow up.
What's wild to me is that Kaepernick at that point in time, I would consider him a top 10.
No, he was on his way down. He was on his way down.
This was
Look up his last season. Yep.
2016.
Yep, a
So
year
3
removed
years after
from
the
a
Super Bowl.
year removed from the Super Bowl, his numbers started taking precipitous drops. He was on his way out, kneel or no kneel. He was
Either
on his
way.
way, and that's what people miss. Now, could he have been a backup in the league?
Dude.
Yes, but when you're talking starters, he was on his way down.
He could have been a starter. He easily could have been a starter.
I mean,
2016. Yes.
not a lot of room on teams for guys with a 52% completion percentage. Now he can run fast, but I mean, so can Justin Fields. He's not a starter in the league right now.
No, but he was for 3 years.
So was Kaepernick.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a whole other conversation.
A whole other conversation. All right, it's been a wrap on Harrison Butker. Hope everybody's enjoyed it. We'll do more of these here on Walker Talks Radio.